Hello, 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 everyone, all one of you. And I have not quite gained the confidence yet to not start out on this screen. However, no biggie. You'll see me gaining my confidence. A lot of this has to do with gaining confidence. Knowing that I am a perfect personality for the YouTubes, and knowing that my aversion to editing both keeps me from putting my best foot forward and justifies the roughness of the live streams. So here I am with where I left off in my terribly failed attempt. I am not perfect. I am quite human. In my attempt to turn a Python file into a command line, a Linux or Unix style command line, so that my blog slice and dice system becomes a little bit more beautiful. You know, I'm seeking beauty and simplicity. Simplicity and beauty, beauty and simplicity. These are things that made Unix and thus Linux quite popular, and Microsoft and Apple and the whole rest of the world yield to the power of the Unix/Linux platform. So I failed, but I am going to do another thing today as kind of a little break. This is not picking up where I left off. I will pick up where I left off, and it's in the spirit of practice, kind of without getting bogged down by such a large undertaking as I realized it was yesterday. You know, in my rabbit hole evaluation, I said, no, that rabbit hole does not go deep. So I plunged down it and found a very deep rabbit hole. So back off, retry. Retry what? Well, that in the future. But for right now, I'm going to channel some poetry, and I'm going to write a macro, a Vim macro. This livecast, Lunch with Mike Levin, is about recording a macro so that all the markdown I do to format my poetry for publishing is much easier. It will be recorded before your eyes and thrown into my tilde/.vimrc for future use, which I expect you will also frequently see, because I write a lot of poetry. And so, before we really start out, a t-shirt reveal is in order. Boop, 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 boop. For anyone who was with me yesterday, you know that I was wearing my wolf t-shirt. And here we are 24 hours later, and I am still the wolf. I choose my t-shirts to channel, and I am still the wolf. And that kind of resonated with me, and poetry poured out. Sorry. Clearing one's throat is kind of disgusting on live streaming, however, is necessary for what I'm about to do, because I shall perform a dramatic reading before I record the macro. Of course, you got to pay a price. And at the risk of demonetizing, demonetizing. See, poetry is everywhere. You got this shit, Mike. You're 51 years old, and that's plenty of time. Just work better, smarter, and faster than everyone else. If you haven't made it by now, you're never going to make it. Okay, so I condition my mind with Jedi tricks. I have Star Wars to thank for some of it, of course. But even George Lucas stole his channeling from Joseph Campbell. Okay, so get your head on straight and use your next 50 years better than the last 50. No, not better. It's just that the next 50 years allows my algorithm to work differently, switching from exploratory activity to exploitative. What? Exploit doesn't sound right. That language is terrible. And lots of people, covet the tech bros, the Gates, the Musks, the Bezoses, the unheard of Larry Ellison. But not all nerds won equally. It's the wolf nerds who won. I don't want to be a wolf. I want to be a sensitive, artistic soul, doing my thing and not having to live that deeply entangled and enslaved as those lives that those tech dudes do. No, nerds like Linus Torvalds and Guido van Rossum really won, in my estimation. They still stand some chance of not being recognized, walking around and enjoying life. Yeah, maybe that's worth coveting. And the real world makers like Ada Lovelace, who invented software, and Grace Hopper, who invented high-level business program, essentially. Yeah, those are the folks who are worth taking note of and emulating. Elon, maybe Elon's a little different. If A is possible, then so should B and C. Only old school establishments holding on to their seat of power with fearful white chuckles and knuckles and chuckles. There's some more of that channeling, right? I'll keep chuckles, but it's also end knuckles. Of a death grip, because shallow oil tycoons are cheaters with nothing worthwhile inside. And so on to my poetry. I am still the wolf, let's not make trouble. Still the wolf, suppress your double. Still the wolf, reread your Carl. Still the wolf, and keep it moral. Still the wolf, you can do better. Still the wolf, a habit setter. Still the wolf, commit in writing. Still the wolf, consistent fighting. Still the wolf, be who you wanna. Still the wolf, I know I'm gonna. Still the wolf, rise above it. Still the wolf, a macro, love it. Still the wolf, now let's go write it. Still the wolf, record and flight it. Still the wolf, that's more improving. Still the wolf, but now I'm grooving. Still the wolf, so write another. Still the wolf, keep at it, brother. Still the wolf, so let's embrace it. Still the wolf, you gotta face it. Yeah, I'm finding my thing. So repeat the poem, make the above one indented for livecast recording or for code formatting via markdown. Make the one below, the one you're going to do the livecast recording. There's nothing like this on YouTube. This is deep, soulful, artistic stuff of the modern age. I'm a coder, I'm a performance artist, I'm a blue soul playing green. You know my Green Lantern fixation. If you don't, you should kind of get the idea from the colors I choose for highlighting and stuff. And so this is the secret of my power for this particular one because I went researching. So before I apply it, I go over to the web browser. And y'all probably saw my thumbnail coming in. Maybe you didn't. Oh, I'm down to no one. Is no one here? Where is that live stream? Stream settings? Analytics? Yeah, I guess it's analytics. There may be no one here. They tuned out. I got too wacky for you, didn't I? So, first of all, a correction from yesterday. I said that Dudley Moore was, that quote where I was going, hello, 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 hello. Hello is mine. I said hello was from Arthur. It was not. It was from the 1990 movie Crazy People, also starring Dudley Moore. And good movie. You should check it out. Yep, Joseph Campbell, the guy who George Lucas has borrowed quite a lot from when he wasn't borrowing from the other guy, right? browser wars. And when I say browser wars, that's Microsoft trying to get you into Bing, right? So when George Lucas wasn't borrowing from this guy for his, hero's journey, myth building stuff, he was borrowing from this guy for the actual story of Star Wars. And so when I do this poetry, it occurred to me, I'm channeling like Azrael from the Batman series when he took over when Bruce Wayne broke his back. So I just went over here to make sure I had my facts right. Jean-Paul Valley, a religious fanatic, all right? The religious fanatics go into fugue states and invent all the technology they need to do the crime fighting when Batman's out of commission. So I mentioned the two Carls, right? The two Carls at the top of the poetry. Reread your Carl. Well, there's two Carls I'm reading, and one of them is Carl Rogers, so that I can just listen better, seek to understand, and, understand so deeply that you can convince the person sincerely, not just convince in a manipulative way, but make the person, help the person understand that you've listened to them so deeply that you can retell it to them to their satisfaction, in your own words, to their satisfaction. That's some deep stuff there, right? And the other Carl is getting in touch with your inner shadow. The probably much more famous Carl, but this crazy looking dude, right? Everyone projects. They're all guilty of, what they accuse other people of. So, I'd be interested in knowing what Carl Jung's deep inner shadow was like. But deep inside our heart and soul, two people walk the lane. One is, one is soft and gentle, and the other hard and vain. And this guy lets you get in touch with your hard and vain inner self. And then finally, just a little bit of searching on regex, the setup for what we're doing here. So once you make a visual selection, when you hit the colon in Vim, it starts to apply everything to the visual selection, unless it's a global search and replace, in which you need this, \% uppercase V thing. But thankfully, I don't need that, because there's this thing. Once you make your visual selection, %norm will start to execute all the commands that follow under your visual selection without a restrainer, without the \, uppercase V thing. So that is very good news indeed for this macro we're about to record. The macro, I have to admit, I am going to copy to have in my copy buffer, my operating system copy buffer for a paste, because I don't want to screw up. But what I'll do is I'll minimize this so I can get the whole poem showing together at once. Oh, someone is there. Han, your Microsoft Office, inside Bing, doesn't protect you against what you actually want to get away from. Like stuff like, I was worried that this was a violation of that whole chat is dangerous to show on the live stream, but it's not. You make a very good point. Want to see where else is doing that? Microsoft is not the only one. That is offered, of course, by Google, especially inside their Google One service. So Google is offering VPN as well. Not that they don't know much of your web surfing, but they don't know what everyone wants what your ISP has. And they get what your ISP has by activating VPN. So not only is Microsoft and Google jockeying to get your VPN, but hopefully I don't screw up by loading something that has preloaded stuff. No, I'm not giving up anything, but I don't know. Let's go to the Mozilla homepage. Get Mozilla VPN, right? They're pushing it too. So you are right on the money, my friend. They're like, we're going to protect your privacy. Let us protect your privacy and be your VPN. So spot on, Han. You know it well. Opera's doing it too. Oh my God. Okay, well, I won't get too off topic. I'm just going to record this macro, and then we can shoot the breeze about all these stuff going on, the violating your privacy in the guise of not violating your privacy. See, they're the wolf. I'm your friend, but really deep down lurks the wolf. I'm your friend. Here's some VPN. I'll protect your privacy. Now, instead of just your ISP knowing your every click, we will too. Privacy, right? Okay, so the one concession that must be made here, I believe, is that you do have to know how to make a visual selection, because I can reduce this macro to just one tiny little key press. Essentially, it's not going to be a convoluted macro. Macros get convoluted much too quickly. I don't need Firefox loaded right now. So macros get convoluted quickly, and to avoid that convolution, you do a little bit of research into the macro you actually want to use. So I'm going to highlight it again to make sure it gets into my copy buffer. And anyone using Microsoft Terminal, you really have to make sure that you go into Settings, and you go into Interaction, and you turn on that very first one, automatically copy selection to clipboard. It changes your life. Honestly, you really need that if you're using Terminal like me to become a Linux person under Windows. Well, you should become a person like me by using a Linux terminal under Windows is really what I'm trying to say. So WSL space -- install, especially if you're on Windows 11. Okay, so Q to put it into a copy buffer. No, Q to start recording a macro. B to put it into copy buffer and to see that, and register. So let me rephrase all of that. Q to start recording the macro. B to choose which register you're recording the macro into. You can look down here to see that you're recording at B, recording the macro at B, right? Very nice. Now I already made a mistake, so I'm going to hit Q to stop the recording because I need to make the visual selection first. I was just getting to the point, the one concession I'm making so that this macro is an easy macro is to hit Control V for block. See that visual block mode down there? And then J, just mosh on J to go to the bottom of your poem. But I'm going to go 2 spots beneath the bottom of my poem because I'm going to insert the citing, the by me name in this. All right. So you do need to know how to do Control V and the J key to kind of make a visual selection bar, visual block selection bar, going straight down the left-hand side of your poetry. You can go over empty spaces. Another reason I did this is because I wanted it to support empty spaces between verses, right? So now I do Q, B. I'm recording into register B. And what am I going to do? Well, now I take a deep breath because everything I do is like make or break the macro. The first thing is shift semicolon, which is of course a colon, which goes into that sort of command mode. And I did that wrong. I did shift double quote. All right, so I'm going to hit escape already because as benign as that seems, that kind of stuff ruins a macro. That's why you take a deep breath at first. So I go to the top, I hit Control V, I mosh on J to get 2 letters beneath, and then once again, Q, B. I am now recording into location B. I now go colon. Okay, see that? This is a very special character. It's kind of hard to understand, all right? But this is where I do that right click now to say %norm, which means execute what I'm about to do. Oh, I might have to type this in from scratch. Yes, I will, because that caret left square bracket is not a real caret left square bracket. So I'm going to backspace over this. Boy, I hope doesn't get into the macro. I'll just backspace to there. I'll respond to you in a moment there, both Brian and Han, because I'm really in the zone. What I have to do is hit I for insert mode, or the norm command, the command that's going to be executed for every line is going into insert mode. I'm going to type a greater than a space. Whoops. So there will be mistakes in the macro. I'm not going to be perfect about this. I'm just going to show you the macro recorded and then tell you I'm going to re-record it later to edit out the mistakes, right, to keep the flow going. Insert mode greater than space, which is now the markdown for creating a quote, right? But we need the line breaks at the end. This now is some special arcane knowledge, all right? Control V, escape. See what I did? I hit Control V as a modifier, and then I hit the escape key after having taken my fingers away from Control V. It's not all three at once. It's Control V, take your hands away, escape key. That inserts the special symbol that represents the escape key in a macro. Okay, all right. So I have escaped out of insert mode. And now the next command is going to be going into append mode in a capital A, which jumps you to the end of the line and puts you in insert mode. Capital A jumps you to the end of the line and puts you in insert mode. Breathe it in, get it into your fingers. Capital A is almost as important as I to go into insert mode. Go into insert mode where my cursor is. Capital A, go into insert mode at the end of the line that I'm on. I am appending to the line. Okay, less than, because I'm starting to type a HTML tag. BR, because it's the HTML for line breaks. Space, because I'll echo the echo chamber somewhere. When singletons are being used on the web now, abiding by the more modern HTML specifications, which reflect XML and the well-formedness of tags, singletons are bad if they're not self-terminating. And when self-terminating, it's nice to have the / of the self-termination not immediately following the characters of the tag, apparently to make it easier for HTML and XML parsers. All right. Greater than to close the tag. And that is it. That is what I hit enter for. And that is going to do that to every line of my visual selection. Bam. Now, macro not quite complete. Notice the dark blue of where the cursor actually is. The cursor is at the end of the last line that I did the visual block selection of, which is 2 lines below the actual end of the program. So I'm going to put a citation in there, but that's a place where I can sort of break my flow for a moment and respond to the folks. So some new names, by the way. I'm going to keep track of everyone who's chatting to me, you know, and who comes in during lunch and who comes in during my midnight sessions. So we got Han. Hello, Han. Excellent, excellent YouTube handle. And we have Brian Gonzalez. Hey, you're like me. Well, what better identity than your real identity? Maybe. I don't know if it really is. Hey, Mike, I quite enjoy watching you work through problems. Keep up the streams, please. Okay, I will. Okay, so I don't want to blow up, but I really do. Carl Jung has taught me that's what I'm getting to. And Han says, I got the M1 Pro. Good, nice. A while ago. Been very fast and great for web dev. Microsoft just announced their own ARM mini PC for Windows. Hope ARM Windows gets better support now. It doesn't even have Chrome. Yeah, you know what? I love the ARM processor. I love everything about the ARM processor. And if you don't all know already, who invented ARM? Now, I'm not just talking about the ARM Corporation, which was the one of the Commodores of the UK. So Commodore of the UK was BBC Micro, right? So the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, didn't make computers. They partnered with people. And so they partnered with the company who made the BBC Micro. And the people they partnered with is the people who are behind ARM. And Sophie Wilson is from Acorn, right? So the company is Acorn. The A in ARM stands for Acorn architecture or whatever, machine code. So Control T for a new tab. Sophie Wilson, ARM. And just like I gave credit to the women of tech who, such as Ada Lovelace, who invented software, and Grace Hopper, who invented high-level abstracted business programming. There were others, you know, I'm just talking in broad general terms. Sophie Wilson here is the woman who reinvented the low power, who reinvented computer architecture, who took on and brought down Microsoft's lock on the industry. Sure, AMD came along and broke the lock on x86 architecture, but Sophie Wilson broke the lock on x86 versus other things. Because, you know, the x86 kicked the, you know, butt of the Motorola 68000, which became the Power PC, which became the cell processor, which became one of the video game engines, very powerful alternative engine, but ultimately the only reason to go with the cell processor is to not be beholden to Intel. So still it lost to Intel for all intents and purposes. The ARM architecture did not lose to Intel. The ARM architecture is kicking Intel's butt, and you have Sophie Wilson to thank. And now from Jake. Hello, Jake. Oh, and Otto's back? Wow, I got a crowd. Okay, so I'm still recording the macro over here. I probably ought to finish it up before I jump in too much with you. So I will read that. And I'm going to want to tell you about a Kickstart I noticed about the server farm of control yourself, Mike. Okay, a careful click back on this tab to make sure I'm sending my mouse input to the right thing. And then I make sure I'm not in insert mode. I am not. So I hit 0 to jump to the beginning of the line, and I hit L twice to get to where I need to be. Now this is an ambiguity because my cursor is currently a block, and I happen to know from muscle memory that when I hit I, I'm going to be on the right side of that less than. These are the little things. These are the nuances. But at least when I hit I, there's no ambiguity that I can type cite. Close. And now ampersand, this is an interesting one, shift ampersand number sign 151, because I love M dashes, semicolon, my name, Mike Levin, Levin, and then comma 2022, because I'll update my macro. I can update these macros once a year. Escape to get out of insert mode, 0 to get to the beginning of the line, because it's always good to end a macro at the beginning of the line. And honestly, it's good to record. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. I should have that glass of water here. It's actually good to end your macro one line beneath the last line, just in case it's something you're going to repeat line after line. Now, that's not the case here. But if I used my old technique of writing a standalone macro to insert the BR at the end of one poetry line, and then I had a mosh on for my favorite Star Wars geek joke, the AT-AT marching across Hoth. Right? That's the macro, processing your thing line by line. But that's what we're avoiding by writing this macro. So I hit Q to stop recording. I hit :W, enter, save, because when's a good time to save? Now is a good time to save. When is it ever not a good time to save? Never. There's no such thing. It's always a good time to save. Maybe at the moment you're turning your power off. Don't save then, because that could corrupt a file. But I am going to hit U for undo and get back to before the macro being applied. Save again, because just I got that habit, right? The one muscle memory you want to get into your hand is saving a lot, which is why I don't get in the habit of quitting Vim with a :Q exclamation point, which would let me quit with multiple files loaded, because I don't want :Q exclamation point to be habit where I will lose data. All right. Let's Control V to go into visual block mode, mosh all the way down to 2 points beneath the poem. Now I'm always going to have to remember that. It's got to be 2 points beneath the poem if I want my by Mike Levin citation in there. But with the block selected, with this highlighting occurring, I can now play the macro that is at B, formatted markdown poetry. Is that not poetry, my friends? Right? Too meta, too meta. Okay, let me save that and do the final step, and then I'll come and I'll talk to you. Get your questions. Oh, 1 point bigger. Well, yeah, I did that in order to have the whole thing showing on the screen, Brian. I like bigger text for sure, but because it was a long poem, here, let me make a poem up for you. Brian needs a bigger font. That is something that I want, but the poem was too long. Woe was me, and now this song. Poetry, right? Now it's formatted poetry. There you go, Brian. And thank you for using a real identity. I just love it when people are themselves. Okay, so the final step here is now going to be to show you that it's in my registers. You'll be able to see that in register B right here. This is that macro right here. It's no harm in putting it in my copy buffer because I'm not going to be pasting from my operating system copy buffer when I highlight that. Q for quitting out of showing you the registers. Save because I just can't help but save. B, without a space, it works without a space. This is one of the places where it works without a space to jump to a particular buffer of a preloaded file, my vimrc, which I always keep preloaded because in a living document, if you want to convince yourself you're a dynamic personality, if you think you're a static personality and you need to convince yourself you are a dynamic personality, keep your vimrc loaded and get down the trick of pasting into it from your registers. So this is poetry. Now I already have this line. Honestly, I never use this macro. And how could I not use let ampersand p equals? I don't use that because it's so easy for me now to do 80 inserts of a minus. Who needs a macro for the easy stuff? The macro is now for the hard stuff, or the so frequent stuff that even the easy stuff is hard in mass. So colon B next is in there. That's not even a macro. That's just a key binding. We'll cover all that stuff. Okay, so I'm in insert mode. You really don't want to be in insert mode for this next step, but I'll just put in the single quote. I know I need that. Hit escape to get out of insert mode. The cursor positioning is a little bit confusing at this point because is it going to insert to the left or to the right? But the key that I hit by accident earlier, I must hit now. You can see my keystrokes because of the great Karnak. Double quote. Now watch this. B, paste. Shift A, you remember Shift A? You should, it's in the macro. Close, up, I got a line wrap. Hit escape to get out of insert mode. Hit Shift J because I can see my cursor is on the top of the two. No, almost made a mistake. That's because of search that made me think my cursor was there. My cursor's really here. So you hit HJKL, H is down, J is up. You hit, no, I got it wrong. See, it's in the fingers. Once you start talking about it, you ruin it for yourself. Okay, so I go to the line where the macro starts and I hit Shift J, Shift J. That just pulls it back. If there were any spaces in there, that would ruin the spaces. And I can see there should be an E there in sight. So I put the E in, which pushes it back down. No, undo. What the heck is going on? It's cursor location that I have wrong. Okay, so we're going to set TW equals 0 to turn off wrapping. And in fact, I've done so much potential damage, I'm going to delete that macro starting from there, and we're going to start again from here with the same ambiguity when you hit escape. But if you have the ambiguity, you can hit L a few times to get to the right. It's as far to the right as I can go, and we repeat. I'm going to let Karnak clear for a second, and I am going to hit Shift double quote, Shift single quote to get a double quote, and then I'm going to hit B where the macro resides, and I'm going to hit paste again to paste the macro. Now that I set TW equals 0, it's not going to line wrap when I go into insert mode. I used lowercase a because I was already at the end of the line. Uppercase A moves it to the end of the line and goes into append mode. My finger knew that because I was on the last thing, I could just do lowercase a. I close it to make it a string, and you can see the color coding change. If I back up, color coding makes it look like commands that are going to be executed, but it's got to have that quote there because macros need to be strings. You saw me hit O before I was out of insert mode, so I knew to delete it, hit escape, and then hit 0. 0, I said O, I meant 0. Jumps me to the beginning of the line. Save, quit, because I want to see the macro come alive, clear, pull up my 18 journals again, drops you into my private journal, but it's not a problem because I just keep reminding you of my creed, right? So you can't see it too many times. The world is your checklist, so look around. The 80-20 friggin' rule, gotta use it. It's a tool reducing clutter that we pack into our lives that hold us back when goals elude and time flies past, and with each step you're still in last, consider how you lost your aim. You'll find recursive tasks to blame. With each step you set to do, 100 more comply at you until at last you quite forget the goal for which you had first set. The 80-20 rule just asked so you to start your plan. I can't do it perfect, can I? You to start to plan your tasks so when you're only 1/5 done, you could have stopped and still have won. That sounds like poetry to me. Highlight it. Shift less than. Period, 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 period. Control V, J, 2 lines below. Oh, I gotta make it so that it is 2 lines below. Control V again. Play the macro that is at P. Doesn't look like it because I don't show the formatting of markdown in my private journal because I don't like underscores at the beginning to turn everything into italics that follows or whatever that does. Markdown rendering isn't for all times or all places, but I can tell that my macro is there. It's in the vimrc, so I'll just undo back to here. I don't even need to save it. I'll try B next, or I'll show you the macro, Control Spacebar. And it didn't request for me to do a save first because my undo went back all the way to the beginning of the undo buffer from loading Vim. Am I getting through to you? Am I going too fast? Am I doing what I always accuse experts of doing, which is to assume too much, or do you like watching me in the flow in Vim, right? There's 2 ways I can be. I can be in the flow in Vim and just do things without thinking. It's like driving and talking. And I'm really even not that good after 13 years on Vim. There's still plenty for me to learn. I didn't know about that % norm. I thought I was going to have to like search for the greater than line return. And whenever you're searching for line returns, rethink, because on the search, \n is fine, but on the replace, it's got to be \r because \n already stands for the null character. And yeah, no tool is perfect, not even Vim, right? There's plenty of little gotchas, the escape key not being one of them. You won't get carpal tunnel syndrome like you will in Emacs, but you're always going to be reaching. So take that into consideration when you figure out what keyboards you would like for your muscle memory. I started out on the big clicky mechanical keyboards based on the IBM Model M. I wish I could show it to you and let you hear the sounds. Buckling springs are different than the cherry blue switches of modern gaming keyboards. And I was a keyboard dandy with those buckling spring IBM Model M keyboards, But that escape key was a long reach and it wasn't very nice to the people around you. So I gave up clicky mechanical keyboards in favor of the Apple-inspired low-profile keyboards, which Microsoft's current implementation is best, and the escape key isn't too far, so I don't remap it in my vimRC because 80-20 rule, you stay as close as you can to the default settings so you're comfortable anywhere you go with minimal configuration and customization. All right, you following? Going too fast? Let me know. Han, I never get used to XJKL, but as on laptop keyboards, I navigate the arrow keys with my pinky finger. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to be a purist about it. If arrow keys work for you in Vim, fine. And Brian says, can you search using regex in Vim? Oh, you must search in regex using Vim. Let me demonstrate the line return searches. No, that's the exception. Let me start with a rule. You know, I got to find where I am demonetizing, or is that demonizing? I don't know. So you just / it's already highlighted, so it'll be a little distracting. Let me just try and search on something smarter. See, as you type, it highlights it. And if it were something that had multiple things, you would type and see the multiple selections, with the gray being the first and the yellows that followed it. You can hit enter, which ends you up on it, and then you can hit N to jump next, 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 which is only one of the two ways you can do that, because you can also highlight a word and hit Shift 8 and jump to the next occurrence of that. I know this is a public journal, so there's no danger in it. And you can be like a predators looking for the next occurrence of predators. You people think, you know, VS Code has some innovations in it. You haven't even seen the start of it. This is 50 years, no, 40 years? I don't want to exaggerate. 1970 is when Unix came out. Bill Joy rewrote large chunks of Unix in preparing it for the public, and in doing so, he added the rewrite of the VI editor. He created it. He added the rewrite of the EX line editor, turning it into VI, the visual version of the EX line editor, making it the VI screen editor. That was around 1976, 6 years after Unix came out. All right, so we're in 2022. If it were 2026, that would be 76, 86, 96, 2006, 2016. If it were 2026, that would be 40 years. So the honest answer is, you know, that would be 50 years. So the honest answer is some 40 plus years. This stuff has been evolving slowly because it doesn't nuke your muscle memory. See? Evolving slowly. So VI was the main editor built into Unix and part of the iffy standard called POSIX, right? Because Unix is kind of a misnomer. That's a really terrible geek joke because it's Multics. This is worth noting, right? This is poetry, man. G semicolon to jump to where I left off typing. People think VS Code is anything special? It's just a distraction. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, Microsoft bought all of it. Linux, Python, Vim, and Git, Microsoft bought all of it. All of it but Vim. Okay. But not Vim, so VS Code will be the place you do your node. And they bought NPM 2. That's poetry, my friends. real time in front of you. Now, I thought about that one before. I'm not that good. At P. And we got to give these some headlines, right? This one is Brian Gonzalez says. This one is all but Vim. Your base is us. And this one is already named. Still the wolf. All right. 3 pieces of poetry on today's lunchtime cast. What is it? It's 1:45. I'm going to have to leave pretty soon because I'm taking the day off from work. It's a short day anyway, Memorial Day. And I need to do my lease signing. Let's see. This stuff is scrolling off. You guys are getting ahead of me. Thank you. Thank you for typing ahead of me. This is one of the biggest pleasures in life. You got the M1. Text is blurry, being at 720. And Han says they believe our personal computer workbenches at home. Oh, Han, you just self-sabotaged. Will be ARM clusters, yeah. So I wanted to show you some Kickstart thing. I don't know if I have it bookmarked, but one of the latest Kickstarters is an ARM cluster you can play with, making it out of Raspberry Pis. That, often spoken of Raspberry Pi rack server cluster is, again, re-implemented. It's been implemented many times out of Lego and other things, but there's a good one right now in Kickstarter that uses the latest, quite powerful Raspberry Pis that are already multi-core. So a cluster of Raspberry Pi multi-core blades makes for a handy little server. Do some cloud stuff at home. Many of the popular Vim plugins is 10 plus years old, still great. Yeah, they are. You don't need no stinking Vim plugin. All you need to do is edit your Vim RC. Don't increase your unnecessary dependencies. See how I switch between a block cursor and a insert I-beam? That's just 2 entries in the Vim RC. If you find yourself using fuzzy matching, right? If you find yourself using Vim plugins for things you can't live without, you've been brainwashed by Microsoft such that you can't live without that, except for the case of typing HTML and JSON in Vim. Then you need plugins, all right? There's always exceptions to the rule. Yeah, they also bought NPM, and you read my mind, right? I had to make that part of the poem. So for those who don't know, of this whole, full web stack thing that is all the rage, which is basically the extraction of the JavaScript engine from Chrome, because Google did such a great job making Chrome run fast that the engine, because free and open source, was pulled out, put on a server component called Node.js, and the world changed because now you have one programming language to rule them all. You have to learn JavaScript anyway to build user interfaces client side, so why not use it server side and just have to learn one language? That kicked off a whole course of event that made even Microsoft admit and accept the fact that the future belongs to full stack development with JavaScript, even though I don't believe that at all. But Microsoft believed it enough to, they believe what I'm saying sufficiently, because when you're infinitely resourced, why not, hire the inventor of Python to be on your staff? Why not make Linux a side-by-side full first-class citizen kernel along with Windows? And why not program VS Code so that Vim is not necessary? Git, I don't know what they did about Git. They're integrating Git into VS Code. You never have to learn Git because VS Code has such great Git integration. And, also make VS Code the obvious preferred choice for the full web stack and kill two birds with one stone. Included in that same breath of stealing the Atom inspiration of the GitHub. Oh, Microsoft bought GitHub. That's what they did about Git. They bought the place where everyone uses, and then they took the spiritual genesis of the first Electron-based text editor, which is the Chrome components that are moved into free and open source, so you can build native desktop apps out of web browser components provided by Google. And in one of the greatest moves of Kung Fu in all the history of tech, they built the Edge browser out of it using the experience of building their Edge browser. They replaced Internet Explorer with a browser cobbled together from Chrome parts. And in having that experience and having bought GitHub, where they acquired the Atom text editor that was using the same trick to make a web-ish text editor, they say, oh, we'll just throw infinite resources and make a Microsoft web-ish text editor. Give it plugins, give it Git integration. Oh, we'll also steal from the Project Jupiter the REPL, the read eval print loop that's making people like me fall in love with the Jupiter environment. So much so, it's my screen too. It goes Vim, Jupiter desktop, and not until screen 3 is it a web browser. Psst. The web browser is now subservient, is lesser, lower in the hierarchy of important things to me than being able to execute ad hoc JavaScript. I mean, JavaScript, this is a Freudian slip. There's a lot of JavaScript going on in here. You ought to research things like 0MQ. I'll resist writing a poem about it, but 0MQ is something for you. To make JavaScript the love-worthy bits. Java has lots of love-worthy bits in it, but so that I can run ad hoc. Python, of course, is what I meant to say. Let's see what the folks are saying. VS Code has some exclusive abilities which are very useful and missing from Vim. Yeah, Otto, I expect nothing less from my Microsoft, loving friend. Yeah, Microsoft does a lot of good stuff. Show me one original idea. Everything built into VS Code was stolen from somewhere. All that original stuff, being able to do that remote SSH as if you were editing a file in a remote SSH server as if it was local, that's all been in other places before. It's just the clever thievery, but implementation matters. So with infinite resources, Microsoft can do the best implementation of a text editor with lots of clever theft. VS Code is nothing special, my friends. I resist. I give in from time to time, but, if you're building your muscle memory on VS Code, you're sheep. You're Microsoft sheep. I use both. I use both too, Otto, as much as I put this stuff down. Honestly, you'll use VS Code. You can depend on it. We need to add a headline formatting to your macro. Maybe. And Han says, I mix between VS Code and Vim daily. Mostly doesn't matter. I do like the Python debug test stuff in VS Code. Yeah, all that debug test stuff is coming to Project Jupiter. Project Jupiter is stealing back. Thank you, Project Jupiter, for your little bug. Variables, call stack, breakpoints, source, kernel sources. There ain't nothing Microsoft did that's original. I wouldn't even be surprised if Microsoft stole their debugging in VS Code out of the early, branches of this. All the stuff you're falling in love with in VS Code is just infinitely resourced theft from Project Jupiter, from Atom, right? If you don't know it, you should probably Google it just to really make sure you understand that this was part of the GitHub purchase, that this Atom text editor was already existed. I wish they just showed a screenshot of the text editor. But it already existed and was part of the acquisition of GitHub. But, Microsoft didn't like say, oh, we'll use that. That'll be our text editor. No, Microsoft said, now that we've put the kibosh on people jumping out of our control onto the Linux, Python, and Git bandwagon, Linux, Python, and Git, right? See, they put the kibosh onto the movement away from Microsoft developer tools, a dependency on Microsoft developer tools, by replacing the one piece that no one will wholeheartedly embrace because of an inherent allergic reaction to the command line interface in the old school ways. No one's going to really embrace Vim as their main text editor. What are they going to do? Be in Vim every day? As their full screen, screen one? And the same threat, the same Vim-like threat that made them do VS Code exists in Jupyter Notebook and Lab. We also can't let them flock. We can't let the flock to Jupyter. So let's flock them. We'll flock them good and lift project Jupyter's best features and put them in VS Code. Yeah, so, be sheep. Be Microsoft sheep. I'm not really wholly putting you down. I'm being as self-deprecating as anyone about this stuff because, you're going to use VS Code. You can depend on it. You will depend on it. Muscle memory intervention is what it is. We need to mix between them. Work on terminals all day, Otto. I know, I'm not really putting you down. You don't have to get defensive. You're just a good straight man because you're on, you're the one advocating PowerShell. And, PowerShell is just another one of these run to intercept people who would reject the Microsoft platform because, you don't have your sysadmin traditional tools. How can you not have ls and for listing a directory? It's just ridiculous. How can you not type SSH and have a secure shell, terminal like telecom-like environment? You just have to. So Microsoft, puts out, they did this with something once upon a time called Xenix. And Microsoft was not blind to the Unix threat. You can see that back in the 90s, when AT&T's System 5 Release 4, when AT&T's System 5 Release 4 was threatening to take over the world because everyone was jumping on, even Sun was jumping on, even Sun, so all these vendors were unifying Unix under one banner, one umbrella, led by AT&T. So Microsoft created Xenix to deal with the threat, but no one used it. Nobody used Microsoft's Unix back in the 90s. I mean, a few people did. You can't say it across the board. But that was Xenix, and it's always the same tricks. Now, sometimes they make good products. You can't universally put this stuff down, because you throw infinite resources at something, eventually something's going to stick and you're going to get it right, like they did with the Windows subsystem for Linux. But, Windows subsystem for Linux, you can't remove the Azure Cloud Shell. You can rename it. So as a Gravity Falls fan, I renamed it Bawarb. If you're not a Gravity Falls fan, you should check out the cartoon. It's one of the best ever. Your Vim and other settings are replicated through Ansible. Yeah, you're hardcore, you know, I get it. You were an Atari ST user. I very much admire you, Otto. Anything I say that might be construed as putting you down is really in love. And then there's Han. Adam had major issues. The main two things was performance and plugin dependencies, right? The perfect kind of things for Microsoft to come in as the White Knights and heal these, you know, performance, optimized performance. We got all this edge, you know, we know how to make something out of Chromium components using the Electron, you know, package and make it perform fast. We're in the browser wars, so sure, we know performance. And plugins, let me tell you about plugins. Does Microsoft have a history of plugins? Yeah, so naturally they're going to do those things better than Adam, and naturally they had to start it from scratch because, you know, it's easier sometimes to start from scratch. You hand it over to the team who did Edge and say, show me what you can do with a browser now. Show me what you can do with a text editor now. And by the way, we'll brand it VS Code so everyone will think it's vscode.net, right? It has nothing to do with the code lineage of, you know, Visual Code IDE. It's been around for Visual Studio, VS Code, Visual Studio, you know, various versions of it over the year. .NET is the last time I remember kicking its tires. And oh my God, talk about heavyweight, overweight, right? So, you know, should I keep track of all this stuff for the notes when I publish it? I don't know. Insult, I was not an artist, I was an amigist. You create new words. Good. I mean, we're very spiritually aligned there. I was creating a words of demonetization being demonization, right? They're very similar. All right. Am I getting to the end? You got to keep asking or else I'm getting to the end. It's 1:02 and I'm going to be heading out really soon. I've been on for almost an hour. And the point of the macro was successfully pulled off very quickly there. It was like the anti-video from the video that preceded it that I fell flat on my face and failed. But I'm going to get up. I'm going to try again, but not right now. Today is about recentering myself. My tools are changing. The carpet is always pulled out from under you. And anyone who thinks that life isn't a series of surviving the carpet being pulled out from under you hasn't lived enough life yet. Those people who haven't had the carpet pulled out from them are like trust fund kids who are setting themselves up for some real emotional difficulties later in life. So get the carpet pulled out from under you a few times. It's good for you. Yeah. Okay, see ya, Otto. That was awesome. And back to work. I'll let everyone get back to work. I think that's a good wrapping up point there. That's all I have to say about that. Thanks for joining me. Hope to see you again soon. Don't forget to thumbs up. Don't forget to tune in to be notified of my live casts. Don't forget this and don't forget that. And, you know, help me blow up. You know, spread the word. I actually want to do it now. I'll admit it. Carl Jung has helped me see the light. Hey there, I just ended my stream.